Thank you, Mr. Ricken, for having us, and welcome to iPhone.com. So first, let's talk about you. As a senior diplomat, you have been working in North America and European countries. And as I know, the appointment as ambassador to China is the first time for you to work in Asia. How do you feel about China?
It's true that here in being the Austrian ambassador in China, for me it's the first time that I have the opportunity to work in China. But my first trip as a young student was to China, in fact. It was in the year 1986. And I had the opportunity as one of the first individual tourists, so I was not traveling with a group, but on my own with a colleague to travel through China in those days. And this was the starting point of a lifelong interest in China and in Asia. And so for me it was I was very happy when I heard that I would have the opportunity to work here. It was sort of closing a loop in my personal life. And this is why I'm enjoying it here very much.
Also, I think that there were not many foreigners for Chinese that time.
Yes, I noticed that also for the Chinese I met then, it was quite new to meet people from Europe. But this, of course, was a very interesting experience for me, but I suppose also for the Chinese I met then.
So when you're back to China to work now, do you find some changes?
Yes, of course, the country has changed very much and has developed very much in an impressive way. I remember I took then the trains that were available in those days. And of course, the infrastructure investments that have taken place in China, high-speed trains, have completely changed the situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. So you have just spent the Chinese Spring Festival under the pandemic, and each time this year, people will get together to celebrate the family reunion. How do you feel about Chinese Spring Festival? Do you have any special activities?
It was an interesting experience, I have to say, and also noticed how important it is, obviously, for Chinese families, because the streets were so empty. There was almost no traffic. It is a little bit like, I suppose, Christmas in my own country, where families gather and celebrate together and eat together, and this is of course very nice. I noticed, of course, also that it's quite difficult right now to travel in China, which also affects not only the Chinese but also foreigners and diplomats, and I do hope that better sooner than later, it will be possible to travel again in China for the Chinese to be able to meet families who might live far away, but also for us to be able to visit all these beautiful sites that China offers to tourists.
You know what? The first country I would love to visit after the restrictions was removed was Austria. Yes, so talking about Austria, I think it is very famous for its music, the beautiful landscape for many Chinese. But I'm sure that there will be other scenic spots or industries that are less known by Chinese but also worth visiting. Could you introduce some to our audience?
Most tourists, in fact, traveling to Austria, they visit, as you have mentioned, Vienna, our capital, or Salzburg, where Mozart was born, or Innsbruck, which hosted the Winter Olympic Games twice, in 1964 and in 1976. But of course there are other places to see too, and I would like to recommend maybe Graz, which is the second city of Austria, the capital of Styria, and it is the city where I was raised. It has a stunning historic center and a lot of places to see in the city, but also in the surrounding areas. It also features on the UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1999. So whenever tourists travel to Austria, of course, I would like to promote my hometown to them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now let's talk about Austria and China's relations. So this year marks the 51st anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between Austria and China. And both countries deepen their cooperation and build mutual trust, I think, under the Belt and Road Initiative. So are there any projects that most impressive you, which bring many benefits to the local people?
We celebrated 50 years of bilateral relations last year, and due to the pandemic situation, it was not possible to implement all the projects that we had in mind. There are some interesting plans we will try to implement maybe this year or next year, like an exhibition on the Habsburg imperial family here at the Palace Museum, and at the same time an exhibition on the Ming and Qing dynasties in Vienna in the Weltmuseum. So we see a lot of potential in further projects that we can do together also after our celebrations last year. In addition, of course, there is always room for deepening and broadening our bilateral relations in the political, economic, cultural, scientific fields. There are many areas where we can do more, and I'm very much motivated to do this as the ambassador right now. On the Belt and Road Initiative, you know that we have not signed a specific memorandum of understanding with China on that, but instead we would like to promote Austrian and Chinese companies to work together in areas like transport and logistics. There is a memorandum of understanding between an Austrian institution and a Chinese institution, and the aim of this memorandum is to support cooperation of Austrian and Chinese companies in third-party markets, like particularly in Africa, in Asia, or in Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe. Austria really supports cooperation with China in the Belt and Road Initiative, but it has always to be in compliance with international norms, obviously, and standards, transparency, fair competition, and a level playing field in reciprocal market, reciprocal market access. Projects, in our view, always have to be also economically, ecologically, and socially, of course, sustainable. The Austrian Federal Railways have signed a freight transport agreement linking China and Europe, and the aim is to establish new and faster transport corridors between China and Austria and Europe.
You have mentioned a lot of cultural exchange, so the pandemic doesn't hinder the cultural exchange between China and Austria. As I know, Austria has a strong export-oriented manufacturing industry, and many of its companies are world leaders in their respective sector. And China is also making great efforts on transformation and upgrading its manufacturing industry. So, Mr. Ambassador, could you please share the experience of Austria's manufacturing in moving to the high end of the global value chain?
Yes, I mean, Austria, not as China, is a very small economy. Our population is just approximately 9 million people. But as other small economies, we rely heavily on international cooperation and trade, and we are highly integrated in international global production networks. Made in Austria guarantees excellent quality, reliability, and high levels of engineering and craftsmanship. And what's the reasons for that? We think it depends on a lot of building blocks that come together to finally make a successful business location. And these building blocks are social and political stability, certainty in investment and legal affairs, among others, then excellent vocational training and education, high spending for research and development, excellent infrastructure, obviously, and also a high quality of living, of life, yeah? So that people enjoy living in the country, and this also is a reason, of course, being happy where you are, then to work in excellent ways.
So it has a lot of supporting measures, as I'm understanding, no matter in education, society, and all parties should work together. Thank you. So next, let's talk about 5G, which is a hot word recent years. I have learned from news that some European countries chose to boycott or to abandon China's 5G. However, last year, the CEO of A1 Telecom Austria declared his support for China's 5G entry to the European market, and also have an open attitude towards the 5G construction. So in your opinion, why do Austria chose to support China's 5G?
5G, as you know very well, networks and mobile communication networks are very important, and they're also of high importance for security, because they have an impact on many areas of our life, like mobile, smart mobility, power grids, automation of buildings, and many other areas. And Austria is a member of the European Union, and the European Union has a 5G toolbox, and this lists a number of risks related to 5G networks. And the Austrian Telecommunications Act that we have decided provides for objective provisions in the event that safety and security critical technologies are deployed. Our aim is the diversification of manufacturers by using an objective evaluation procedure. Austria is strongly committed to implement these toolbox of the European Union, the 5G toolbox. And I would also like to add that in the program of the current Austrian government, it is very clear that we would like to avoid third country dependency of 5G technology, and the ultimate goal for the European Union and Europe and Austria is 5G autonomy.
So will there be any cooperation in 5G between China and Austria in the future?
Yeah, it depends on the criteria that we have established in our Telecommunication Act. If these criteria are fulfilled, it is possible, and if not, of course, you have to adapt the procedures.
Thank you. Now let's talk about the what is going on, the pandemic. I would say it's still spreading all over the world, especially when the variant Omicron happens. It has spread more faster. Yeah. So on September last year, you have visited the Sinopharm China Biologics Beijing to investigate the production and the manufacturing of the COVID-19 vaccines. How do you feel about that, your visit?
Yeah, it was a very impressive visit, I have to say. I was very much, there were a lot of explanations in detail how the development and production of these vaccines goes on, and we of course welcomed the rapid and fast development of Chinese vaccines last year, and also the deployment of these vaccines to the global south, because it really helped, so to say, to manage the pandemic situation globally. Yeah. We also have welcomed very much the emergency approval by the WHO of the Chinese vaccines, and we have recently passed the Austrian government, the Austrian Parliament has passed a law on a mandatory vaccination, and in this law, also the Chinese vaccines of Sinopharm and Sinovac are, so to say, if you are vaccinated by those two vaccines, it is you have fulfilled your obligation along this degree of mandatory vaccination, which is very good for those Austrians, for example, who live here in China and get the Chinese vaccines when they are coming to Austria. They don't have to get another vaccinations, so to say.
So the full vaccination means 2 doses?
Two doses,
oh, okay. So it is approved, I mean, by Austria.
Yes, to fulfill this vaccine mandatory degree that we have in place.
Thank you. So are there going on, or will there be any cooperation on anti-COVID-19 drugs?
Yeah, this of course depends on also on the companies. Yeah, there were some plans last year. I'm not aware right now if there are new plans, but if there is an interest from the Chinese side, for example, to get the certification in Europe, for Sinopharm and Sinovac, I suppose there would be ways, of course, to cooperate.
I heard that Austria is going to remove the restrictions against COVID-19 in March. So why do Austria take this decision?
Yes, we notice that right now we have very high levels of Omicron cases in Austria. But it seems that, or these are the predictions, that the number of cases are going down due to the vaccinations, rather high level of vaccination, and also because so many people already have been affected by this sickness. Sooner or later, the cases are going down. And in addition, after 2 years of pandemic, many people are exhausted. If they have been affected or if they have been vaccinated, they ask. And also the cases, it was very important in Austria always to keep the hospitals working and not being overwhelmed by COVID cases. And this is one aspect of the Omicron, that the people are sick, but they are not, as most of them, they do not need to go to hospital, and the numbers of Austrians being in these intensive care units is very stable. So we think that the system, the health system, can cope with the current levels, especially if they are going down. And this is the reason why a number of restrictions, not all restrictions and not all over Austria, but are going to be removed in the coming weeks, like in other European countries.
So people still need to wear masks?
In some areas, yes, but for example, pupils, students, they will be able to sit in school without having their masks.
Now let's talk about another topic, which a big thing is just around the corner for Chinese, is the annual political sessions, 两会. And each time this year, the delegates from all over the country will get together to discuss many hot social topics. So one of the most important is about education. And as you just mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, Austria has a well-developed education system, and also it is strong in vocational education. However, in China, I would say most of the parents, they think vocational education is inferior to the high education, or we call it ordinary education. So how do Austria deal with this? How do your policies work to encourage students to take vocational education?
Yes, we have similar problems like China in this area, but we have a long tradition of vocational training and a training that we call apprenticeship. This is a special way of vocational training where the students attend a vocational school, but at the same time work in companies. And this is very popular, we have to say, because I mean, Austria is a much smaller country than China, but we have almost 29,000 companies in Austria who are training over 108,000 apprentices every year. And the advantage is that you get theoretical knowledge, and at the same time you can practice what you are learning. And this is very important, because we need, of course, people studying at universities, yes. But at the same time we need experts working in companies. Because even if everything works in theory, it has also to work then in reality, and for that you need experts, and they are also during the course of their professional life well paid. Mm-hmm. So it is a way of training young people that we have very good experience with, and it's also the aim of the government to further develop this system.
So the salary, the average salary for the people who take vocational education is, what is the level of it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. You start as a relatively young person, yeah. But if you start at universities for many years, so to say, you are not gaining a lot of money during those years. And it also then depends on what you are studying, which job you are getting, and which career you are able to have. And if you are an expert in a company, frequently very sought after, and your power to negotiate wages is quite strong, yeah. And also you have opportunities to continue your education even up to university level if you would like to. Yeah. So we open a little bit the system from vocational training. If you are motivated to go further on, you can even go through this avenue to university if you would like to. Or you stay in the company and work there. So it's not an end in itself, but it's a starting point that can lead you either continue to work in a company, or even also then continue higher education later on. I think this is very important, because many young people, at least in Austria, they don't know right from the beginning what they would like to do, or what they would like to study or to work.
And another topic which attracts a lot of attention is women's rights. And I have done some research before this interview. It says, according to media reports, women account for more than 57% of the Austrian cabinet and 53% of the federal government in 2020, indicate a rise in women's participation in political life. So what mechanisms are there in Austria to encourage women to have the equal rights to participate in the political life?
Yes, the principle of equality is already embedded in the Austrian constitution, and this of course excludes any discrimination or any privilege, yes. Based on sex. And in 1998 there was an amendment to the constitution that forms the basis for, we call it gender mainstreaming at all levels. So each policy that is decided has to be checked in advance what consequences this policy or the implementation of any political decisions have for gender balance, for the right of women, and for the equality of sexes. And these measures has to be screened in advance, and this has proven to be proved to be very effective. Of course, this is we have further mechanisms in place, like an Austrian National Action Plan on Gender Equality in the labor market and the Commission on Gender Equality. So this features very high on the priority list in Austria, and the numbers that you mentioned reflect this general approach.
Yes. So I'm curious about how do Austria protect the right of the pregnant woman? when they are in the labor market?
Yes, they are protected well. Yeah. So, for example, you must not work. You are not allowed to work 8 weeks before and 8 weeks after delivery, which is a quite long period. And in addition, you have the right not to work, if you prefer.
But will it make them disadvantaged in the company when considering the promotion or other things?
Of course, some women, if they are not working for quite some time, it might be a disadvantage. But it's, I mean, these 8 weeks, they are legally binding. But if the woman chooses to work after these 8 weeks or 16 weeks at home, of course, she can do it. And in this case, there might be no huge disadvantages for her career because it's 16 weeks. But it has to be, of course, the decision of the mother and also together with the father. It's still the case that most of the time the mothers take the paternal leave, but also fathers can do it, and this is also promoted because it is good for the child, obviously, if the father is at home when the child is young, but it is also good for the labor market if it is normal that not only women take this parental leave, but also men, because this is the advantage for women if only women take the parental leave. So the policies are going in a direction where it should be normal for mothers and fathers to take parental leave, and it's also that you don't have to, I mean, you get some money for that, so you are not losing a lot of income, if you take this parental leave, because some people, they simply cannot afford to stay at home for a longer period. The fathers, this was a recent decision, can have the right to stay at home 1 month after a delivery. This is unpaid, unfortunately, and it is called Daddy Month. Yes, just as a starting point.
I think another problem that are facing by both Austrian government and also Chinese government is the low growth rate of the population, an aging population. And according to the data from Statistics Austria, Austria's population only increased by 30,000 from 2020 to 2021. And China recently also updates its population growth rates, which almost fell to 0. So how do Austria deal with this? Are there any policies to encourage fertility?
Yes, part of this is what I mentioned already, these opportunities for parents to stay at home or to just make it possible for both parents to see after their children, which helps. But also important measures are dedicated funding for child care expansion, so that it's not too expensive for parents to send their children to kindergartens and nursery schools, especially below the age of 3. And then also there are several measures in place, but in addition, I have to say that the population growth you have mentioned is due to migration. The fertility rate is below an optimal level in Austria, like in many other countries. But we have attracted, quite big numbers of migration flows. In the early 60s, in Austria, there were only 1.4% of the population were foreign nationals, and now the recent numbers are 18%. So 18% of the Austrian population are non-Austrian citizens who migrated to Austria. And without these migration flows, the population would have shrunk. So the increase in population that you have mentioned right now is only due to migration.
So are people in Austria young people? willing to give birth to babies? Because nowadays in China, not many young people want to raise a child.
Yeah, as I said, the fertility rate is too low, so not enough have enough children. Yeah. I myself, I'm a father of 4. Yeah. So I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, so I know exactly how difficult it is on the one hand to raise children, but on the other hand, of course, how much pleasure is linked to that, and how beautiful it is to have a large family. But of course, not everybody can do that, and so the environment, family-friendly environment, has to be in place, and for that many measures are important. In our case, education, for example, school is free of charge, yeah, basically. So the financial burden because of education is low or non-existent. Yeah? But of course, in addition, you have a lot of economic challenges when you raise children. Yes. And the aim of the government and of the society is to help here. And to take this burden from young families. But of course, you cannot force people to get children. Yeah? It's always a personal decision. So we have to find a balance here.
I think it's a long-term.
Yes, of course it's a long. You cannot just push a button and then suddenly you have an increase or a decrease. But it's a long-term challenge for national politics.
Thank you. And last but not least, we are very much curious about Austria's green technology, which is also a hot topic in recent years. And Austria is a global leader in the green technology, such as the waste management, the air pollution control, and also solar power. So could you please give an example in which Austria keeps the balance between environmental protection and also development of its heavy industry?
It started already in the 1970s that people started to worry about the pollution. Yeah? It had to do with, on the one hand, tourism, I have to say, because if you want to attract tourists, you need a healthy environment, good air.
Especially for Austria.
Yeah, especially for Austria. And at the same time, of course, we have also seen challenges like transport, energy production, and industry and agriculture. And so we quite early developed a sort of feeling that it is necessary to do something, and this is why the federal and also the provincial governments have adopted many rules and regulations to fight the pollution of the environment. But it's also for us, of course, it's a challenge to make it possible for companies to produce. Yes. Yeah? And to transport goods, obviously, and to produce food for our farmers, and on the other hand, to protect the environment. But the Austrian expenditures of the budget on environmental measures in terms of the GDP are very high. I think we are among the highest in the world. At the same time, we see a lot of opportunities to develop, like China, I suppose, to develop green technologies, because we have to do something. If we don't do something, then our Earth is doomed. And this is why, on the one hand, development of technology, science, is important, and on the other hand also educating people is important, and on the other hand managing traffic flows is also important. So it's a large basket of measures that is necessary. Sometimes people in Austria believe that we are such a small country with only 9 million inhabitants. It doesn't really matter if we are protecting our environment or not, because it's a global challenge. But I think it's really necessary that we work together, everybody works together, and everybody does her share, because only if everybody is doing something, then we will make a difference. But I think in Austria the awareness that it is necessary to do something is well developed.
Yeah, as you mentioned, social awareness and also policies, they are both very important. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ricken. Thank you for your informative answers.